Hey everybody, as mentioned, my name is Jeff Schwarting, and if you have questions throughout this that you want to ask me later or whatever, here's my contact info. I check my email like once every 2 weeks now that I just use Slack at work, so just text me or something. Today, well actually, I'm curious, so in the room, who are UX/UI, who are designers? Whoa, okay. Any product managers? Okay. Anyone else, like software engineers, or what do you do? Programming? Okay, cool. Awesome. So by way of introduction, well, first of all, a disclaimer. This presentation is going to be quite unlike the last one. This is going to be very tactical, and I'll mostly be talking about using a specific tool. So I combined the two and made up a new word, which is very difficult to pronounce. So I went to BYU, the business school, where I learned things that were, I later realized, either false or useless, or in some special cases, both. Right after BYU, I started a company with my partner Daniel, who was supposed to be here, but he got stuck in California. And we were gonna like do the big exponential climb thing and have this rocket ship. After like a year, we realized that our rocket ship was really more like a 1980s Toyota Corolla or something. And we did that for a while. And eventually we just quit. We were like, this isn't working, let's get real jobs. So we were both fortunate enough to work at Jane as product managers. We were their first 2 product managers and their only 2 product managers at the time we were there. And after that, I went to Lucid Software, which is where I am currently, and have a sticker on my computer to prove it. So a lot of entrepreneurship stuff for the first like half of my, post-high school life. And through all of that, I learned a lot. I learned that we were just doing everything wrong. And later, I wrote a book about it called The User Method, which is kind of cool. And anyway, the second half is all product management stuff. So today, I'm going to be talking about product management. In my experience so far, product management boils down to prioritization a lot of the time. Like, everyone already has, we jumped into Jane, we jumped into Lucid, everyone's got a huge backlog, right? You look into Jira or Trello or whatever you're using, and there are like 150 things you could do. And it's the CEO's ideas and some customers' ideas and sales ideas and PM's ideas, and there's just like, there's no end to the things you could do. So a lot of the time, so far in my career, what I've been doing is prioritizing, figuring out what things should we do next, and then how should we do them, right? This got me thinking about product generally and what we do. Entrepreneurship, by the way, is very similar to product management. It's a lot of prioritization, like what should we build next and what should it look like? And I was gonna have a slide up here that said something like add value to people's lives, provide value, etc. But that felt like too vague to me. And a nuance of that is that sometimes we provide value in a way that no one cares about, right? Like we think it's valuable, but no one else does. And so I've kind of adjusted my definition of what we do, and that's basically helping people do what they want to do. And sometimes they want to do things that they shouldn't do, but they want to do them, right? And so it's kind of, depending on what kind of organization you're in, maybe your job to help them do that thing anyway. And there are a couple ways to screw this up. Number one, you help people do something they don't want to do. Like sauna pants. I don't know. That's all I have to say about that. Or the family bicycle with sewing machine. I wasn't sure if this is a real product, but look at the guy on the very back, like he is serious about this, right? Another way to mess this up is you don't help people do something that they do want to do, right? For example, bald guys want to grow hair back. I'll be in that position like a couple years from now. I love, by the way, that this like really complicated device, the farthest they went to describe what it is just hat. Any kind of hat that helps you grow hair. People want to grow their hair back probably, but obviously this doesn't work, right? Otherwise we'd be seeing them all over the place. So helping people do what they want to do is kind of what it boils down to in my mind. And if you're successful at this, you win, pretty much, generally. I mean, there are a lot of other ways to screw it up with pricing or marketing or whatever, but like, speaking from a product perspective, here's just a few examples of people who are crushing it, right? People want to take pictures and they want to just like burn time looking at other people's pictures. Instagram does an awesome job of allowing them to do that, facilitating that action. Tesla, people want to, get places but not driving their own car. and not have to pay for gas, etc. Anyway, Apple, you know, everyone knows, is doing a great job of giving people aluminum things. So generally, yeah, if you do this, you win. As I mentioned, there's kind of an asterisk, like there are other ways to kind of mess this up, but we're gonna pretend that doesn't exist. So now the question is, how do we know what people want to do, right? That's the big question. Kind of back to the backlog, like there are 150 things we could do. What are the most important ones? What do people want to do the most, right? And if we add the most value to people's lives in this way, hopefully they'll use our products and find extreme levels of value in them. Jared Smith, who was at some point the CTO, COO of Qualtrics, he worked at Google, ran Google China, he's a smart guy, has this quote which I find fascinating. Innovating isn't hard, customers will tell you what they want, right? So there's kind of the answer. Now this breaks down when you're doing something inventive. Like in the entrepreneurship space, if you're inventing a new thing, there's that famous quote by Henry Ford, right? Where he says, which he maybe never ever said, it's kind of apocryphal, but where he supposedly said that if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So there's kind of this bifurcation. Like if you're inventing something brand new, you actually take the exact opposite approach to this in most cases, and you don't ask anyone what they want, and you just build what you think should happen, and then it becomes GoPro or Ford or whatever. But for us, where we're working on products that already exist, this is kind of the way to do it. So the difficult part at times is not only prioritizing what people are saying, but also getting the data from them. And sometimes we find ourselves sending too many emails, too many surveys, too many customer interviews, right? But there's a huge set of data that most companies, that probably all of you already have, that you could look through, where people are already proactively every day telling you what they want, right? And here's a list of some of them. Support tickets can be super useful. If it would be, if you haven't done it already, like if you go back to work and just read through like 20 support tickets, you'll find probably some useful insight pretty quickly in those. Emails, Twitter, app reviews, etc., right? So in some cases, we need to build the mechanisms to get more feedback from customers, but in a lot of cases, like we probably already have quite a bit and maybe enough. Now here's where it gets a little more difficult. You have to get access to those systems, read all that stuff, and categorize it to figure out what the heck is going on. And this can be really difficult. Like at Lucid, every morning I log into like 6 different things to see what people have said, right? We have Android app reviews, iOS app reviews, customer support, 2 feedback channels through email. It's not endless, but it's a lot of work to access that stuff and then read and categorize it. So this is what the tool that I'll be talking about does, is trying to do a good job of, is help you access, read, and categorize the feedback that you're getting. And when you do, a lot of the time, I don't know why this slide's in here, but when you do that, you can have really clear outcomes a lot of the time. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. So during the startup days in the entrepreneurship era of my life, we built a product called Spring Sled, which is like a project management tool. Oh, and Asana was just here. It was way worse than Asana, and we made like $500 total. But while we were building it, we didn't really know what it should be. It was kind of a weird take on visualizing time, and it was, instead of having a calendar, it was like this really long timeline kind of thing to help map projects, almost like a Gantt chart, but kind of mixing that with project management. And I don't know why we decided to do it, but we did. And once we jumped into it, we were like, oh geez, now we have no idea where to take this. So we just put a form in the product that said, hey, what do you think of the product? How are we doing? What can we improve, right? And people, not everyone, but enough people would respond to that we got enough emails to find some signal. And so we found that people wanted an overview page, they wanted to be able to upload files, they wanted a couple other things, right? But once we read through all the emails and just counted everything, it became really clear what the most valuable thing we could do was, which was build this overview view where you can see all of your projects on kind of one calendar. Once we built that, people stopped asking for the overview, and everything else kind of shifts up, right? Now like 50% of people are asking for file upload. So what do we do next? Obviously, we're going to build file upload. It gets really obvious really quickly. I worked at Jane as well, and at Jane, Mike, the CEO, kind of challenged us to work on retention. And so what we did was we looked through all of our customer data, and we found people that had been shopping on Jane for like 2 years, I think, and then hadn't been shopping on Jane for the past year. And some of these people were unbelievably active. There was one woman who had a purchase on average every 8 days for 2 years straight. She spent like $5,000 on Jane in a 2-year period. And then one day, we kind of graphed out her purchases on a timeline. You can see all these little dots, and one day there's just the last dot, and then nothing, pure silence for a year. So that's interesting, right? So after that, we got that list of people. We went to our customer support system and just looked at what they had sent us. What was the last thing these people said to us? And from that, it became really obvious what the issues were. And for the most part, it was people returning things. We had, well, still, it's a little rough to return stuff, but it's a complicated, difficult process to return an item you bought on Jane. You have to like email support, they email the seller and wait, and then the seller decides whether or not you can return it, and then support emails you back, and it takes like 2 weeks and 15 emails, and it's hard, right? So that was probably like 60% of people leaving was because they were trying to return something, order cancellations, etc. So anyway, we went up with this list that was really clear. Like, here's the number one reason people are leaving Jane. Here's number 2, 3, 4, 5 through 8 or whatever it was. And that basically built out our roadmap for a long time. Like, they're still working on those features today. I don't even work there anymore. But that was a good way to not only know what to do, but also pitch it to the executives and get buy-in. One example, well, here's an example of another thing. People were complaining about shipping times. They're actually not that bad in most cases, but we were telling them they were really bad. And so we just changed that to tell them what they actually were. So another example at Lucid is we had, on the mobile apps, I'm on the mobile team at Lucid, you can't work offline. So Lucid is a diagramming software, and people just kind of expect mobile apps to be able to work without internet connection, and ours doesn't all that well. So for a long time, the designer that I work with was talking to my boss, who's kind of the director of product, and saying, hey, we need to get offline mode onto the mobile apps. But it was really hard to convince anyone to do anything about this because it's a really difficult problem. It's going to require not only to work with my team for like quite a few sprints, but also a couple other engineering teams. So this is a huge investment, and everyone's kind of wondering like, I don't know, is this worth it? I know you think it's really important, but is it really? And when I got there, all we've been doing is interviewing people and then telling my boss and kind of any other stakeholders like, hey, people really want offline mode. But we weren't really proving it to them, right? Until we started counting, like actually counting up. We'd go through interviews and just say, how many people are asking for offline? How many people are asking about other things? I've blurred the rest of these out because I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about and what I'm not, so sorry about that. But anyway, this became a much easier sell to executives once we had the data. And what's interesting about this is it's qualitative data, right, that we just quantified. And it's really easy to do this, but a lot of people don't. So especially for people who are doing like user interviews, for example, which is the way we were doing it, I found that typically people just don't try to quantify that type of information, but it can be easily quantified. And when you do, it becomes a really clear sell to people above you. Another interesting thing about this is if we looked at a different data set, offline was actually like near-ish the bottom of the requests. People are still requesting it, but not as much as some really simple things like, for example, copy and paste. You can't copy and paste between documents on the mobile app. Building copy and paste between documents is going to take us like 4 days, right? Building offline mode is going to take us months. So, I mean, this is not like a silver bullet, of course. You still have to exercise some judgment in deciding what to do next, but just getting data in this format really helps you to prioritize what should come next and discover things that I didn't know that this was a thing. I didn't know that you couldn't copy and paste between documents until like 2 weeks ago when I ran this analysis. But now I know you can, and it's a problem. Here's another interesting example. iOS 11 just came out as a beta in July, and right when it did, we now track what people are saying, we track feedback and kind of graph it over time. And iOS 11 became like our number 2 or 3 topic in the feedback we were getting in July. And that was because our app didn't work on iOS 11. because it was a beta product and we just like, it had just come out, we just weren't ready for it. So we start getting all these people telling us, hey, iOS 11 is broken. We fixed it and everyone stops talking about iOS 11, right? But that became a really easy way to prioritize what needs to happen next. That's kind of an easier one, right? Which is putting out fires, but kind of an interesting example of like dynamic information coming through customers. This was Chinese. Chinese was becoming an increasingly large problem over time, and we don't really know why, but we know it was. And so after we saw this, we just prioritized the whole Chinese issue, fixed it, and now it's gone. This was photo uploads. People were requesting the ability to upload a photo to their diagrams from their phone, which makes sense from a mobile device. And it's kind of a cool feature because it's something you can't do from a computer. So again, you know, that's kind of high-ish on the list. We build it, people requesting it drops to 0. So you wind up with like this rolling graph, you can almost imagine, where things kind of bubble to the top and then you do them and then they fall to the bottom and something else will come replace it. And at Lucid, we run A/B tests non-stop. There's one team that ran like 60 A/B tests in a 6-month period or something. And something interesting about those A/B tests is if you look at the genesis of the test, like why did we decide to test this feature? If the impetus was customer feedback, those A/B tests won 90% of the time. If we looked at A/B tests that we ran because we thought it was a good idea, and we're just being like Einstein, you know, and we're thinking way ahead of the market or whatever, those tests won 20% of the time. So this doesn't add up to 100 intentionally, but that's kind of led us to this 90-20 rule kind of concept that some of us have at Lucid. Anyway, so this has led us to take customer feedback a lot more seriously and use it as a prioritization mechanism. But here's the problem with that, is this is usually what it looks like, right? You wind up with like some huge 500,000 row export of your Zendesk tickets or something. And it's just, somebody's got to read this stuff, right? And just categorize it. So what we used to do, and this is how we did it at Jane, was we would just read through all these things and have a new column that's called like theme or category or something, and just like write out what people are talking about. Oh, this guy's talking about iOS 11, photo upload, iOS 11, iOS 11, photo upload, offline mode, whatever it is, right? And after you do that, you can just like run a count function in that column and just see how many people are talking about what things, right? That's just, it's hard. So Daniel and I built this tool called Unbird. Why Unbird? Not because it makes sense, but because the .com is available. And I'll show you how it works. So, oops. We'll just run through a real example. Actually, I already did this. So, the way this works is you can import a data set. Let's just look at a new one. Go to Spotfire. And right now it supports like a number of data sets, so you can, anything you can get in the CSV format, whether that's customer interview or emails or whatever, you can upload, API, etc. Also, it'll just grab app reviews, which is kind of the easiest way to do this, so I'll do that. So we'll look for the Spotify app, import the reviews there. This is growing out and from the App Store, getting the most recent 500 Spotify reviews, and from now on it'll update automatically. So once you do this, one of the reasons I use this now at Lucid is because one of the main value adds, which is like not actually that hard to do, but all of our data, all of our customer feedback data is now in one spot. So if I go into a meeting and someone asks a question about whatever, and it's in like that one survey that we sent 6 months ago, and I don't remember where it is in Google Drive, I've got everything here. So here's how this works. These are Spotify's app reviews, right? And you can read through them all. And basically the workflow is generate keywords and themes. And so the system, let's see here. People are probably going to be talking about like, you know what, actually let's do the Home Depot app. Because I just read through this and I know what I'm talking about it. Okay, so portable app. This app should get 0 stars, but that's not an option. You cannot edit existing receipts to your order. Oh, receipts, that's interesting. I wonder how many people are talking about receipts. You highlight a word, and the system will go through all the reviews and find everyone that's talking about that thing and then highlight it for you and tell you how many people. So, okay, it looks like maybe with the app, like people want receipts in the app or something, I don't know. We're just gonna say that, yeah, that's a thing we wanna keep track of. So receipts is a theme. So we'll add that, and then it'll eventually graph it out for us. Another thing I've noticed people talk about is the search feature. Well, obviously, you could also look for things like crashes, timeouts, etc. See, I'm talking about timing out. Not that many, actually. I looked through this before, though, and I know that the search is something people are talking about quite a bit. So how many people are talking about search? A lot. Search. If I was a PM at Home Depot, this search would probably be my number one issue right now, right? We've got like, 15, 16% of people talking about search. Also, if there's another word that people might be using, like let's go back to the Spotify reviews. So let's say I have a theme here like ads, but people also say the word commercial. You can add multiple keywords to this theme. So that's the way this works. You add keywords, the system looks for any of those keywords. If a piece of text contains that keyword, it will be added to that theme. And then you wind up with these themes that you can go through and read what people are talking about. And it adds the word for you. So once you do this, and again, you can do this with like customer support tickets, obviously app reviews, customer interviews, kind of like any data set you have that's text. And once you do this, you wind up with a pretty clean list of what people are talking about. And obviously you have to exercise judgment, and maybe that's not what you do next, but that's how that works. Another cool, does anyone have any questions about this to this point? By the way, if you have questions as I'm going, just like raise your hand. Yeah, did you have one? Oh, sorry. Just thumb up. Cool. If you do, just let me know. So this is kind of how we have done things at both Jane and Lucid. And once you've identified your themes, a lot of times it's helpful to know like what exactly are people talking about. Yeah, people are talking about search, but like what about search? What are they saying? So you can either look at it here, just Home Depot apps. You can just like click on search and see what they're talking about, or up here you can search through your entire data set. So if you have customer interviews and app reviews and support tickets, etc., it'll tell you what people are saying about that thing across all data. So there we go. Cool. So, any questions about the tool? Look good.
Is there a cost?
What's that?
Is there a cost?
There's not a cost. No, it's free. And again, you don't have to use this tool specifically. This is something you can do in Excel, a number of other places. But I'm curious. I'm like not necessarily an expert on this. I'm sure many of you are better at this than I am. So I'm curious in your experiences, like what methods you all have been using to prioritize stuff and how this compares to that. If there's something far better than this. What's that?
This is better.
Cool. Anything else that you have found useful? Yeah.
I'd like to do something similar. They can take all the feedback and get them curated into content, and then go back out to your attorney or customer, and almost force them prior to, so that they have to choose from, hey, I have three things I want all of them, which I only get two once. So then it helps you see what you really care about rather than something that just gets voted on.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Is there different ways to chart the data, or is it only by like support entries? Just like for example, so I'm a student at UVU. We're studying UX design, and this tool's awesome because we're actually doing homework on quantifying qualitative data, and we get these like big surveys about like favorite iOS features, and they're qualitative, so it takes forever to sort and clean up. Is there a way to just quantify based off like entry, like how many people like something, or I don't know, because right here it just says like, oh, in August this many people did like this.
Right. There's not at the moment.
No. Well, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, sorry. The question was basically, is there a different way to graph the data aside from just over time? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. Yeah?
Have you considered, or does it have the capability to integrate support tickets into, not support, customer support tickets, but internally, like analyzing the backlog of all like Jira or Trello or whatnot?
Maybe. Yeah, so when you create a new data set, example, these are the data types that currently the system can't accept. So if you can get one of those things into a CSV, that's maybe the easiest. Like I don't know if Jira exports to CSV or it's some type of Excel file, but it does. Yeah, so you can export anything you can export into CSV, you can then upload into here. Another one that we've found useful is the Gmail integration, because a lot of times support tickets will get forwarded around, and like I get a zillion support tickets forwarded to my Gmail, so I can just connect to Gmail and say, hey, go find this label and just pull in everything that's just from the support label and look at that. Yeah.
Plans like integrate like Help Scout, some of these other platforms that have APIs.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on like what is needed and stuff. Yes, we do. Any other questions or rivaling methods to prioritization? Cool. So that's almost all of it, but this is what you can kind of wind up with. This is like an example of something that I might present to executives after I've run an analysis like this, is then go grab the data and just put it into like a presentation. I mean, you could show it directly, but this is actually GoPro's app, the GoPro Quick app. I just went through and looked at what's going on with that. And iOS 11 crashes are obviously something that should be addressed, right? But you walk into a meeting like with executives with a slide like this, and then you can follow it up with, and here's exactly what people are saying about this thing. And typically, I mean, this typically works, right? This typically gets everyone on the same page and helps people understand like what's a priority and why. And that's been really useful both at Jane and Lucid. So I'm curious if anyone wants to go through a data set of their own really quick, or an app, because we can find your apps all here. We can do Jane, in fact. There's not a whole lot of insightful stuff on Jane's app because everyone loves it, fortunately, /unfortunately. Anyone want to volunteer one? It doesn't have to be something that you work on. It could be something you just use a lot. What's that? What? Hulu.
My voice is very bad.
All right. We'll look for that. I've never used it, so you're gonna have to help me know like what to look for. By the way, also, if you're ever going to apply for a job or something, this is kind of a cool way to set yourself apart, right? Go find that company's app and just analyze it and send them, hey, here's what your issues are right now. Here's what you should be doing. I'm already working for you. All right, here's Hulu. Latest update is terrible. These are good. Some of these are really good. 2001 called, it wants its UI design ideas back. Whose idea was this? Alright, so let's see how many people are talking about design. Design might be too broad a word, we'd have to spend some more time in it, but a lot, right? So we've got about, it looks like 10% of people talking about just design, right? What are some other issues? Are there any guesses? Yeah.
If you add like 2 keywords for one, does it have to be in a row, or can it just be the entire code? So, design iOS.
No, you could add, like, let's see. Library, this guy's also talking about library. He's the only one, so. Are you talking about 2 keywords for the same theme?
Yeah, so it took a while to get. Like you said, design is probably a little too broad. So shiny ones.
Oh, yes, sort of. If they're adjacent.
So if they're not adjacent.
No, you could like if an entry has the word design and the word something else, you can't do that right now. Yeah. But usually it's like not super necessary. As you read through this stuff, you can kind of get a better feel for what people are talking about and what kind of terminology they're using to describe it, and just pick a better word than like design. So what's something that somebody here hates about the Hulu app? Ben?
Chromecast integration.
Oh, all right. So we'll see if anyone else agrees. Chromecast. Oh yeah. Chromecast can't log in. The Chromecast button is delayed or something. App fails to connect. Okay, cool. So, oh, that's plural. Wow, that's some bad spelling right there. It's really hard to type at this angle, by the way. Bad ergonomics, in case you were wondering if your has desks in your office. So, yeah, people talking about Chromecast. Anything else? Navigation, we've got a few people talking about. So, I mean, again, the cool part about this is like, I don't actually have to read through 500 of these and find which ones are talking about navigation, right? I just found them in like 2 seconds. There are 8 people talking about navigation, and here's where they are and what they're saying. Another one, people might be talking about like ads. I don't know, does Hulu have ads? Commercials? Yeah, so maybe ads is a thing. And to this one, we can add another keyword of commercial.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So is it counting in one comment it says ads twice in the comment? Is it counting double counting that, or is it one per comment?
Just once per comment, yeah. Because we just want to know how many instances, like how many people are talking about a certain topic. So yeah, sometimes you'll notice people, especially with the word ad, people will say the word ads like 8 times in one review. You know? So it'll tag all those, but it'll only count that once. Yeah.
So as far as the time on the calendar goes, it's all showing up right now as the 17th. So it just adds new ones the next day automatically, or do you have to go back in and say collect new ones again?
This will add the new ones automatically. So the initial import is just the most recent 500 because that's what the App Store limits you to. But yeah, like this will actually every half hour it'll go out and grab all the new ones.
So is that why it's only training from September?
Yeah, because basically we have 0 data until October.
Can you go back?
We can't right now. Yeah, we have to figure out how to like get more. But if there was and the reason this is happening is because the most recent 500 for Hulu are all in October. If it was a lower volume app that doesn't get as many reviews like the Lucid Chart apps, for example, this would go back like forever, just until we have 500 reviews. So, if anyone wants a job at Hulu, like here's a good place to start. So is this making sense? Look cool? Awesome. And again, for my purposes, typically like this winds up in presentation form where we're kind of like further distilling this information into something that an executive can look at in like 1.5 seconds and understand and like be on board with. Cool. Something interesting about the Spotfire app is, and I feel like you maybe could have like gotten a job there if you had just brought this up to someone. They, a while ago, so this data is all brand new, but we ran this like a month ago, and this preview thing. So playlist is being mentioned a lot, which you'd expect. Ads are mentioned a lot. There's some like pausing issues, crashes, etc. But the word preview started showing up a lot. And last month it was a lot higher than it is this month. And we're like, that's interesting, what's going on with preview? And turns out, bring back the preview feature. They made it easy to find new music. Preview song removed. I also loved the preview song, but that's gone, right here. So apparently they had some preview feature, I don't know what that was exactly, but they removed it just a couple weeks ago, and people are like up in arms about that, right? They love the preview feature. So if I'm a PM at Spotify and I'm actually like reading what people are saying, I know that I screwed up big time removing that preview feature. Depending on what the company's objectives are, maybe there's some like big overriding, initiative that would make that make sense still. But if not, That's a big deal. So again, this just helps you not only gather the data, but also just look through it and discover things you might not know, but also prioritize things you already do know in a way that's pretty simple and easy to do. That's it. So unless there are other questions, I'm done. And I guess we can all just mingle or something. Yeah.
So, as you started out, you talked about all the different forms and areas you're getting feedback. So, are you using this tool to capture that all, or are there still pieces that aren't integrated yet?
There are a lot of pieces that are not integrated yet. The CSV one, for example, like when we run a survey, we just wind up in a CSV, file, and that I have to just upload manually.
Sure.
So yeah, you can't just automatically plug everything in yet, but app reviews, email, there's also an API if you have access to engineering, and you can tell them, hey, whenever someone responds to this survey or whatever, also send that data here. So you could do it, but it's getting there. Yeah.
Talk about prioritization features and development perspective, but do you use it from in any way, shape, or form as a customer engagement tool? So we talked about Spotfire, how they removed that feature, but maybe it's because of some business direction that they're going, and possibly using that to say, oh, well, people are talking about this, maybe we need to communicate with them about this strategic direction we're going. Why?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is really just identifying the issues. It's not telling you what you should do about them necessarily. So as an example, at Jane, shipping times and cost are something people complained about a lot, but the reality is shipping costs money. You go to the post office and ship a shirt and it's gonna cost $4, and it just does, right? There's not a whole lot we can do about that. So the solutions to those problems might not be in product, but anyway, yeah, this is just identifying issues. It's not necessarily helping you know exactly how to solve them. And it might not be a product issue, maybe it's just a communication issue or something like that. Good question. Anything else? Yeah?
I'm curious how you identify, well, I imagine you have a certain buyer and user personas, right? There's certain buyers and certain users that you're willing to solve for. How do you identify those your ideal buyers, your ideal users, and use that weight into your decision on prioritization?
We don't yet, although you can. We've kind of just barely started to at Lucid, where let me find one that has that. But basically, you can add properties to these pieces of feedback, so you can know who said it, what's their email address, what's their account, are they a Google employee or just somebody who you would not care about as much. And what's their account level? Are they paying us $1 million a year or whatever? So we're kind of headed that direction. Yeah, that's a good question. That really throws a wrench in things though, because then
you do it manually. There's no way to do it automatically.
No, not right now. Not with this. You could do it with other systems. You could do it in Excel, I'm sure, somehow.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question though. Yeah.
So it looks like you based this based off of review data, like natural language reviews. Did you take, for example, lots of websites have these NPS surveys where they say, hey, what can we do to improve our product? Could you apply the same thing to an NPS survey to drive what your future prioritization should be?
Yeah, you can. Let me log into my Lucid account. And we did that at Lucid. There are thousands and thousands of NPS. Let's see, NPS. So we split them up into good and bad reasons. So anyone that gave us an 8 through 10, we called those good, and anyone that was 7 or below, we called bad. And if we look through those, I don't know how many entries there are in these data sets, but some of our data sets are just monstrous. This one has a couple thousand, it looks like. But here are NPS reasons. So they give us a bad score, and then we ask why, and they tell us, and here are some of the reasons, right? It's complicated, pricing, performance, they don't like the interface, export. A lot of times I've noticed also some of these things, you're not always going to grab the top thing off the list, because it doesn't always make sense to. Pricing, for example, the product costs what it costs, and I don't really have the authority to make a decision to reprice it. So I'm just going to kind of ignore that, right? But we get down to something like export. That's a really specific example of something that people are having problems with, obviously. So let's see what you're saying. Exporting is kind of difficult. Export to Visio is premium. Port integration and import-export options, not intuitive. This guy's saying easy to export, so occasionally you get some that are a little off there. Export, if I could export to Glyphy. So some of that stuff is useful in determining what to do. But anyway, short answer to your question, yes, you can use anything. Anything that can be in a CSV can be in here. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you say that you don't do pricing? You're in product, right?
Yeah.
Who does pricing?
That's a good question. I really have no idea. I'd imagine those are conversations that happen at the executive level, and probably board of directors as well. I mean, that's a huge change. Like, at Lucid, we have $40 million raised in VCs that like really care about our revenue, and if we were to start tweaking the pricing, that's just something that would be scrutinized very heavily.
Did you say you don't always grab what's on the top?
Yeah.
Other things that help you decide, kind of look at or grab?
Yeah, I mean, this like helps kind of identify what are like the top set of issues, and then from there, like the offline example at Lucid, that's just a hard one. That's going to take us a long time. It's a serious investment, and so you kind of have to run through like a cost-benefit kind of thought experiment there, and just decide, like, is it worth 6 months of engineering time to build this one feature when in those 6 months we could build these 12 features instead? So that might cause us to not pick the top thing off the list, even though it is offline. Like, that's tough to justify, or maybe not. Right? Maybe it's like, no, we definitely need this, and this proves it, so let's go for it. But yeah, some things you just don't have control over, like pricing. Other things, even though it's the top thing, it still may not be worth doing compared to like the number 2 thing or 5 thing, whatever. Awesome. Well, if you have other questions, again, feel free to text me. If you email me, I'll seriously never see it. Or find me in the Slack group, the Product Hive Slack group. And as I'll just like, since I've got a couple minutes here, is this hooked up to sound? Does anyone know? It's not? That's okay. Oh, we do have a microphone. Okay. So I'll just give like a really quick plug for the other end of this spectrum of like deciding what to build, which is listen to literally no one. And here's some proof of why that's a good idea. I gotta think about where I can find this. There we go. All right, here's how, well, you'll see it, but if you're making like a quantum leap, right? Like you're not just, I find that typically product is adding like kind of thin layers to a product that already exists, right? And we're making incremental improvements, and usually people think in terms of incremental improvements, which the Henry Ford quote, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, kind of speaks to that, right? They're not thinking like, we could have something completely different from this. They're just thinking, take what I have and make it a little bit better. That's not always the case though, and sometimes in product you wind up doing something that is kind of quantum leap. And here's how that happens. This is like the most successful method for doing that, and it's unfortunately hard to apply, but here we go.
So I launched it at Harvard first because I wanted it, right? I mean, I built it for myself.
A lot of other experiences that kind of led to that, but then I'm like, God damn it, I'm gonna fix this for myself.
I did the whole hardware, I wrote the computer programming languages, I did every single bit of the whole computer. That's unbelievable. But I did it not for a company. I did it just, I wanted it myself.
Boom. I don't know how you reconcile that, and that would be like impossible to pitch, I feel like, in a company. Like, hey, I'm gonna disregard everything that all of you say and just build something because I want it, right? That's tough to do, but it works, as you saw. So anyway, that's all I've got for you guys. But again, reach out with questions, and it was fun to be here.